The woman who's been named as the greatest American songwriter of the 21st century, but who's also been subject to many, many controversies. It's Lana Del Rey. Hello and welcome to 6 Notes of Separation. Happy New Year, everyone. If you're new to the podcast, here's how it's going to work. Every episode, I dive into an artist exploring their lives, their musical works, any scandals they might have found themselves tangled up in. But I like to put my own little twist on things. I like to keep things intriguing and enticing for you all. So every episode I do has to be connected to the previous and succeeding artist in some way. This could be through a producer in common. This could be through subliminal lyric references, if you will. This could be even through a relationship the two artists might have. Truly anything goes as long as there's a connection. So without further ado, we're going to be diving into the artist who shifted the sound of pop music in the 2010s and who's become an 11-time Grammy Award nominee. As I said in the intro, everyone, it's Lana Del Rey. But before I take you back to the start of Lana's career and the start of her life, it's time to reveal the link between this episode and last episode's Post Malone. This connection comes in the form of a man named Louis Bell, who produced Post's 2023 pop folk inspired album Austin, and to my absolute delight upon research, has also produced on Lana's song Fuck It, I Love You for a 2019 and critically acclaimed album Norman fucking Rockwell. A lot of profanity, and we're only like 2 minutes in. But there we go, that's Lana for you. Bell is a huge producer working with pop royalty such as Taylor Swift, Miley Cyrus and Justin Bieber. But Post Malone and Lana Del Rey have a lot more in common than originally meets the eye. Upon research, I found out that both have histories of alcohol addiction. So I guess that leads really nicely into 1985, where Elizabeth Grant was born. Grant was raised a Catholic in New York City and became the cantor in her church choir, which I believe meant she was the chief leader and singer of the choir. She attended a normal high school for a year, but was soon transferred to a Christian boarding school aged 14 or 15 in an effort to get sober from her alcohol addiction. I mean, aged 14 and 15 and she's an alcoholic, it's, you know, to say she hasn't had an easy life would be an understatement, I think. If you listen to last episode, you'll know that Post Malone similarly had to sober up from alcoholism, but unlike Grant, who turned to alcohol from an early age, Post Malone's addiction was more so a coping mechanism and a direct consequence from being cancelled and being famous at such a young age. The need for the escapism alcohol provided, though, came from Lana Del Rey's, or Elizabeth Grant's, if you will, deep loneliness and sadness towards the world. She described not having many, if any, friends at school. And in an article for The Telegraph in 2013, she said, "When I was very young, I was sort of floored by the fact that my mother and my father and everyone I knew was going to die one day, and myself too. I was unhappy for some time. I got into a lot of trouble. I used to drink a lot." I mean, I think having that context is really, really great foreshadowing into the themes and sound Lana will explore when she becomes an artist. A lot of her music is very depressing, to be honest, and I know people, like fans, aren't happy when I say that her music's depressing, because I think it was the same with me being like a Billie fan. It's the same when people say, oh, Billie Eilish's music is just for depressed people. But like Lana's music, I'll get onto it later, but it hurts to listen to for me. She's very mellow, and the themes she deals with are very heavy. And I think now, knowing the background of her childhood and I think her mentality, her mental state, it makes a lot of sense why her music is the way it is. When she was 18 years old, she dropped out of school to go to rehab and has been sober ever since. She spent a year living with her aunt and uncle, working as a waitress, and it was her uncle who made her first pick up a guitar, teaching her the first 6 simple chords there were to learn so that she could begin to write music. However, the existential outlook on life was a perspective that 19-year-old Lizzie Grant couldn't shake. And I think listening to her music, as I just said, it's a view that she'll continue to never shake. So in 2004, she went to Fordham University in New York to major in philosophy and also search for a way to bridge the gap between science and God. Obviously, she was very intrigued with the reality of life. You know, she had this big existentialism about death and about what it means to live, but she also had the Catholic but she also had the Catholic upbringing, which obviously had her believe in Christianity and God. So I think her studying philosophy was her way of navigating those two conflicting perspectives, maybe. Throughout this time, she'd write music and play sets in nightclubs for fun, and from 2005 to 2006, she released music online under the stage name Maid Jailer. At the age of 21 in 2006, Lizzie Grant performed in a live songwriting competition, and it was here where she was introduced to a man called Van Wilson, who worked for an indie record label called 5 Points Records. A year later, she submitted some acoustic demos to 5PR, that's just the acronym I'm going to give it, and then landed a $10,000 contract, which allowed her to move to a trailer park in New Jersey to begin working with producer David Kahn. Unlike most musicians who tend to drop out of uni and pursue music, Lana Del Rey actually cracked on with her degree, and she ended up graduating from Fordham University in 2008 with a BA in philosophy. She also released her first EP titled Kill Kill under the name Lizzie Grant, so kind of ditching that Maid Jailer pseudonym. Soon after this release, a name change for the singer took place once again, this time settling on Lana Del Rey as we know her today. The name, although many have called a persona, was what Lana describes as a tool to shape the music towards, pointing out that the name reminded her of the glamour of the seaside. There has also been theories that Grant was inspired by 1940s Hollywood actress Lana Turner, who was described as the pinnacle of Golden Age Hollywood. Again, a theme which runs more as a motif throughout Lana Del Rey's work. You know, that it comes under a lot of scrutiny, and again, it's all stuff I'll cover, but I would say like a big theme of her work is Hollywood glamour and kind of 1950s, 1960s inspiration in America. Like a big theme of hers is Americana, basically. What's really interesting here, though, is the symbolism that Lana Turner's life represents. To summarize very quickly, Lana Turner became increasingly famous for her increasingly tumultuous family life. Turner was in an emotionally and physically abusive relationship with gangster Johnny Stompanato, and in an effort to protect her mother, who was in a violently escalating argument with Stompanato, Turner's daughter Cheryl Crane stabbed him to death. Now, I know I talk at a million miles per hour, but it's because there's so much content to get through here of Lana's life. But this is quite key. Like, just this subtle reference to Lana Turner's life is something we're going to learn is actually really almost integral, and almost like predetermines is almost a bit too much of a philosophical word, but almost predetermines Lana's life and themes of writing. This idea of, well, not this idea, but this reality of being in an emotionally and physically abusive relationship and having the kind of duality between love and conflict is something that I think is very persistent in Lana's work. And to me, it's very fascinating because that context, before even looking at Lana's music, the name alone gives such an insight into the darker themes she ends up exploring. And this is something I'm going to circle back to at the end of this episode, but back to the music. In 2010, Lana Del Rey releases her debut self-titled album, but quickly withdraws it in an effort to buy her rights back from 5PR. You know, we've seen this with Taylor and Scooter Braun. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I have an episode on it for you all. But it was a big thing, I think, especially in the last, I'd say it's changed a lot in the last 5-ish years, maybe even the last like decade, but it was a big thing in the past that record labels would have the rights over all of the artists' music. It was just artists had no ownership over their stuff. So this is why Lana withdraws her self-titled album from 5 Point Records. In 2011, she uploaded self-made music videos of her songs Video Games and Blue Jeans to the internet, which would end up becoming viral sensations. We all know Video Games, we've all heard it. And this threw her into a record deal with Stranger Records and then a joint deal with huge labels Interscope and Polydor. So this is really, I'd say 2011 is really where she lands her fame. It's really where she lands her mark in the industry. Her first album release under her new label was nothing short of a success. Born to Die went straight to number 1 in 11 different countries. It was the 5th best-selling album of 2012, and as of 2024, it has spent 520 weeks, or 10 years, on the Billboard 200 albums chart, joining Adele as the only other person to achieve this. I mean, those are just barbaric, monstrous figures. 10 years on the Billboard 200 charts. That's phenomenal. That is phenomenal. But as intense as her success was, so was Lana's heat from the public. As a result of her name change and shift in sound compared to when she went by Lizzie Grant and made music under Lizzie Grant, Lana Del Rey started to receive a load of backlash for being an industry plant and changing who she was to fit whatever mold the record label she was signed to wanted her to fit. Personally, I think this is a very unfair judgment. I think so much of Lana's heat and criticism and headlines and scandals and whatever, I think so much of it comes from the context at the time. I think now, you know, if she were to be famous now, no one would even ever bat an eye at calling her an industry plant. Like, the fact that she changed from Lizzie Grant to Lana Del Rey is nothing but, for me, like, it's nothing really but personal growth. Also, I just think, you know, when she went under Lizzie Grant, she was 22, 23 years old. And by the time she's Lana Del Rey, she's 26, 27. Like, that shift from 22 to 27 is pretty massive. Like, 22, you're kind of at the start of figuring out your life, I would say, like trying to get your stuff together. And then I'd say by 27, you kind of have more of an idea of the trajectory of where your life's going to go, or at least like what you want from life. You know, I feel like a lot of clarity in what you want happens between those years. So I think the fact that Lana, you know, dyed her hair and she adopted a new name and she changed her sound sonically in her music, I don't think that's anything to receive hate for, to be honest. I just think she was allowed to grow. And that's what she puts it down to as well. She said, I never, you know, Lana Del Rey isn't a persona for me. It's just who I am. And I think that's a really important point, because I think with the accusation of being an industry plant came a lot of people saying that she was inauthentic and she was trying to basically be someone she wasn't and sing about topics she didn't really resonate with just to fit, again, what the label wanted. But I think the name change is actually a sign of her authenticity, because she's using the name to embolden her music and to encapsulate the mood and aesthetic of her songs. And therefore the name is therefore who she is as an artist. I don't think it's her putting on a pretense. I think it was just something that described or wrapped up what her music involved. I don't know if you guys know what I mean, but for me it just felt like a symbol of clarity. It didn't feel like a move away from who she was. Anyway, the public slander didn't end there. In fact, the whole industry plant / persona scandal, if it's even a scandal, if you even want to call it a scandal, was only the beginning for Del Rey. She's an artist that feels like she's never had a break from criticism. In 2012, with the release of her EP Paradise, she was called out for misappropriating the Native American culture in her music video for the song Ride, when she wore a feathered headdress. And she was called out again a year later for her short film Tropico, when the 2 small teardrop tattoos she had on her cheek was criticised for wrongfully impersonating the Latinx culture. I'm going to get onto her larger controversies later, but for now, again, I'm going to quickly speed through her musical success so you can kind of see how each time she gets caught up in a news story, or I keep calling them scandals. I wouldn't really call them scandals, but I don't know what else to call them. I guess each time she gets caught up in a controversy, it is almost more and more increasingly damaging, because her fame and her success continues to grow alongside the hate, if that makes sense. It's almost like she has further to fall. In 2013, Lana Del Rey released Young and Beautiful for the movie adaptation of The Great Gatsby, and was launched further into the limelight for the Cedric Gervais remix version of Summertime Sadness, which landed her first US top 10 hit. I mean, this song is massive anyway. Like, the original Summertime Sadness is, I think, something that circled back like a couple years ago when she played Reading and Leeds. I think it was in 2022, maybe 2023, don't quote me on that, but really, really recently, everyone was singing along to that. Like, everyone can get in their sad girl era for Summertime Sadness. It's just so good. And the remix version by Cedric Gervais very much fits with where the music industry was at that time. You know, this is in the 20-teens. So upon listening to it, it literally just sounded like all the other music in the 20-teens. Don't hate me for saying that, but it's very much like Titanium by Sia featuring David Guetta. You know, like that remix. That's what this remix of Summertime Sadness was. Like, they all had this overly produced, like, almost like 2016 and Ibiza energy. And this is something that's actually really key about Lana Del Rey. She was absolutely instrumental into shifting the pop industry. Pop at the time of her breaking into the industry in the 20-teens had a very heavy electronic dance music influence, and Lana really shifted that. She really shifted. I'm quoting here something I saw that a journalist wrote, but she really shifted the pop landscape. She made it something much moodier and much more mellow, and kind of took everything down a beat. And if I'm honest, I would say Billie was kind of the next one to do it. It's really hard when I talk about Billie Eilish because I'm such a fan that I don't know sometimes I literally don't know what's factual and what's just me believing what I want to believe. But I would say that Billie was really, for me, the next instrumental figure in the pop scene to drastically shift what pop meant and almost redefine it. And it's funny because Lana Del Rey was such a big inspiration for Billie. It's funny that Billie's almost been the next Lana, in my eyes anyway. You know, I think when We Will Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go came out in 2019, Billie's debut album, for anyone who doesn't know, the way it sounded, not only just the sound of it, like this, I can't explain it, but it's like the sound landscape she created, like the soundscape she created, as well as the topics she wrote about, I just think were things pop, like people in pop didn't write about at the time. You know, pop's so much about love and heartbreak, and that's kind of seems to be the foundations of any songwriting topic. But when you have Billie really talking about mental health in a way I don't think other artists had necessarily talked about so explicitly and so clearly, yeah, for me, I feel like she was the next major shift in pop. And I would say this summer has been the next instrumental shift with people like Chapel and people like Sabrina. I think Sabrina's vulgar language, again, is something you don't see in pop. Like, her sense of humor is something that feels quite refreshing. And also Chapel's way of dealing with the public is something that feels quite refreshing. You know, you're not getting polished pop stars like you once did. Anyway, I'm digressing. From 2014 to 2018, Lana Del Rey consistently released album upon album, giving us Ultraviolence, Honeymoon, and Lust for Life, as well as collaborating with The Weeknd on his smash hit 2016 album Starboy. Throughout this time, she was nominated for countless Grammys, but it wasn't until 2019, when she released her critically acclaimed Norman fucking Rockwell, as I mentioned in the intro, that she truly got all the accolades and flowers she deserves. Still hasn't won a Grammy, which is actually ridiculous upon reflection. But Norman fucking Rockwell, or NFR as I'll refer to it as, is her best reviewed album to date, with the major music publisher NME rating it a full 5 out of 5 star album. Interestingly, it was the first album she also collaborated with Jack Antonoff, who, if you don't know, is really the man that's been shaping the way pop sounds for the past decade. Again, I've done a podcast episode on him. He's really the man behind every major song in the charts, to be honest. He's worked with Kendrick, he's worked with Taylor, he's worked with Sabrina, he's worked with Lorde, he's worked with Lana. Like, I can't tell you how fascinating his discography is, and how influential he is in the way pop has, in the way like the pop world has gone. But anyway, NFR was the first time she collaborated with him, and Lana continues to be a hive of creativity, with releasing her debut poetry book in lockdown, accompanied by an album-esque audiobook produced by Jack Antonoff, as well as releasing 2 albums in 2021, which was how I first found Lana. And this is where I was talking about earlier, I first found Lana and it broke my heart in the way that I've never listened to music that gut-wrenchingly sad before. And, you know, I was an avid fan of When We Will Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go, which, upon reflection, in hindsight, is a very gut-wrenchingly sad album. But Blue Banisters, oh my god, if any of you have listened to Blue Banisters, I actually pray for you, and I pray for your souls, because that album shattered me. I literally wrote a dramatic entry in my notes app. I think I found this album, how old was I in 2021? I must have been 16 maybe. I wrote in my notes app this dramatic entry like, wow, Lana Del Rey, I've never been so heartbroken in my life. Like, Billie will always be number one, but Lana, geez, I haven't felt music that hurts to listen to. How dramatic, how emo of me, but it's true. I really can't, like, when I see her in my Spotify queue, I really have to take a moment and be like, am I mentally well enough to listen to this? Like, can I listen to this song and it not depress me? Because her music has that much of a chokehold on me. Like, it genuinely, I don't know what she puts in her music, but it is so sad. It's just, it like pierces my soul in a way no other music does. So anyway, that's how I first found Lana Del Rey's music. In 2022, a new release from Lana was put to a halt when her car containing her laptop, hard drives, and cameras was broken into and stolen. She lost all musical material she was working on, as well as a 200-page manuscript of what would have been her second book. I mean, that I can't say. I write a lot of poetry, like this isn't meant to be about me, but just to contextualize, like I write a lot of poetry. If all of that had been lost and I had no backup of it, oh my God, I would be in so much despair. It's a joke. I would sob. So the fact that she had a 200-page manuscript of her second book completely eradicated. Oh, and knowing that someone else had it in their hands and was reading it all. Oh my God, guys, that would give me so much anxiety and it would make me so upset. But she deals with it like a boss, to be honest. She comes back in 2023 with her 9th studio album, Do You Know That There's a Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard, to reveal what she describes as her innermost thoughts. But perhaps it's her openness and her honesty that is ultimately what makes her such a polarizing figure. While some find comfort and relatability in her lyrics, others find anti-feminist and pro-violence themes. Landing us at the heart of this episode and at the centre of Lana Del Rey's controversy, which is her stance on feminism and what her music is accused of promoting. The assertion that Lana is glamorizing abuse through her music is a statement that first came to light in 2012. As I said, criticism has really followed Lana throughout her whole career. She hasn't really ever escaped it. But it was first mentioned when she released the cover art for her single Blue Jeans, which features a man choking her. The same accusation flared up again in 2014 when the title track for her album Ultraviolence featured a lyric which went, "He hit me and it felt like a kiss." Clearly not a metaphor most people would use. And it caused outrage not only from the public, of course, but also from Lana's peers in the industry. Notably with Lorde saying in an interview, Del Rey's music was so unhealthy for young girls to listen to. I mean, that's quite bad. That's quite bad, having pop royalty around, especially when she's fresh. Like, again, this is like 2012, 2013. That fresh into the industry, that Lana's only been in the industry for what, like one or two years at this point, and already Lorde, probably one of her biggest, I wouldn't say rivals, but maybe definitely someone who's in the same category of pop as her. She's got Lorde saying that girls shouldn't listen to her music because it's so unhealthy. It just makes you want to cringe. But it is clear that upon reflection, Lana has lent more into their point of view, responding in a state of discomfort to a question about the lyrics, saying, "I don't like it. I don't sing that line anymore. Having someone be aggressive in a relationship was the only relationship I knew. I'm not going to say that that lyric was 100% true, but I do feel comfortable saying what I was used to was a difficult, tumultuous relationship. And it wasn't because of me. It didn't come from my end." For me, I just feel really sad for Lana, to be honest. It feels like she was criticised and cancelled, if you even want to take it that far. It feels like she was criticised and cancelled for talking about her experiences of being in an abusive relationship. But, you know, I also do see the point of view that's like, she has a huge platform and should perhaps consider or think about how to phrase things and how what she says can influence those who are listening to her music. Moving on, in 2015, Lana said that in an interview for the New York Times that for her, a true feminist is a woman that does exactly what she wants to do. And if that means sleeping with a lot of men or being in a really physical relationship, then so be it. But all these accusations of Del Rey being anti-feminist and glamorizing abuse came to a head in May 2020 when Lana took to social media to express her case. She went onto Instagram saying, "I've been honest about the challenging relationships I've had. That's just how it is for many women. I think it's pathetic that my minor lyrical exploration detailing my sometimes submissive or passive roles in my relationships has often made people say I've set women back hundreds of years. I'm not a feminist, but there has to be a place in feminism for women who look and act like me." To be honest, I think that's a pretty strong argument. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I just get into sticky territory when I talk about, like, when I share my opinions on celebrities' cancellations, but I feel like she presents herself pretty well here. I think to say this to social media, which is very pro-female empowerment, and, you know, that it's pro-female empowerment for good reason, but I think what Lana's trying to shed light on is the fact that people in abusive relationships can feel ignored or neglected because they're not seen as powerful. They're not seen as fitting into that female empowerment bracket or movement, if you will. But Lana's argument seems to fall to pieces in what she says next. She expresses her frustration towards artists like Ariana Grande, Cardi B and Beyonce, who all land #1 hits by talking about being sexy and cheating on their partners. Yet when it comes to her writing about the realities of being in a flawed relationship, she's crucified for glamorizing abuse. Now, to remind you of the context of this post, it's May 2020. The same month George Floyd is tragically and brutally killed. The same month the Black Lives Matters movement takes ahead. So in what was a fight about feminism and topics of songwriting, very quickly turns into a conversation about race. By plotting herself against the list of musicians she named, almost all of whom were of colour, the public jumped onto her case, accusing her of feeding into the historic racist tropes of white fragility versus the over-sexualized black woman. This online reception was a very similar one that Taylor faced during her feud with Kanye, but to summarize for anyone who isn't aware, when Taylor, with the whole VMA scandal where Kanye interrupted Taylor, I think it was at the VMAs or the MTV Awards or something, and said that Beyonce deserved the award over Taylor. From then on, like the way the media spun the story and the way the media retold it and the way the feud went, it was actually, everyone was in favor of Taylor and was like saying what a horrible man Kanye was. And it was actually Kim Kardashian that changed the whole mindset and the whole reason why, you know, snakes and reputation became such a big thing was because Kim cancelled Taylor for feeding into, again, these same racist tropes of the black aggressive man versus the white innocent woman, and so Taylor was a snake for that, you know. And there was a bunch of other context, like honestly listen to that episode because it has all of it in there, but that's kind of a summary. And this same accusation has been held to Lana. Lana was quick to defending herself, saying, "I could have literally said anyone, but I picked my favorite fucking people," continuing with the fact that they went to turn my advocacy for fragility into a race war. It's really bad, referring to the culture critics and people online had created. Now, my personal thoughts, do I think Lana was just naming musicians off the top of her head without giving it much thought? Yeah, that is honestly what I think, but do I think she could have done more to get her point across articulately and without plotting herself against other female musicians? Absolutely. There was no need to name drop other artists. There was no need for Lana to plot herself against other musicians and her peers, to be honest. And I think the fact that she does just kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth, just a little bit, because I just, you know, the media tries to put women against each other enough, and then in the music industry as well, like it's obviously all about stats and #1s and charts, and the media does enough in naming people for competition. Like, I mean, look at the whole Sabrina versus Olivia Rodrigo, look at Billie versus Olivia Rodrigo, look at Taylor versus the whole entire pop industry. Like, there's so much just competition in music, and I think people and the media, again, I'm kind of sound like a broken record, but people love to invest in that competition. Again, I'm just going to bring up Olivia versus Sabrina Carpenter because it's an easy one to remember for me, but when you look at how massive that feud got between the two in 2020, again, if you don't know, it's in my episode on Olivia Rodrigo, but that feud got absolutely astronomical and everyone bought into it. Like, everyone, it was all anyone on TikTok would talk about. Everyone was waiting for the diss track songs to come out, not even diss tracks, but you know what I mean, like songs referencing each other to come out. And it created a really horrible atmosphere in the music industry, and it's something that was really prevalent in the 2010s as well. I think, you know, a lot of pop artists would try and battle to have the biggest pop song, and they'd, you know, work with the same remixers like David Guetta or Calvin Harris or something, and it was a very big thing over who kind of had the songs of the summer or whatever, and that still is a thing now, but I think you see a lot more artists supporting each other now, especially on social media. Like, a lot of them will promote each other's music. So I think the fact that Lana, in response, with this post uses other women to get her point across, it's just not really on. And the fact that she's not painting the women in a great light either, like she's not necessarily saying anything bad about them, but I think the fact that she's it feels like she's victimizing herself at the expense of other artists. It just doesn't sit right with me, and I just don't think that was necessary. Like, the first part of her argument I felt was really strong. Like, yeah, I think it's important that she does speak about the realities of an abusive relationship. You know, it's always going to be tricky because she has a young fan base. It's always going to be tricky to not be damaging, but there's a way she can do it. And, you know, I think if she's giving a voice to the people that are in those relationships, like, good on her, like, that's fantastic. But then being frustrated because your peers have number one songs and your peers don't get criticized for their subject matters, don't let that become your problem. You know, like, just let that exist in the same space as your music. It doesn't need to be a competition. I don't know. To conclude, I think it's fascinating that the name Elizabeth Grant chose to be a musician under is a name that sheds a lot of light into the thematical exploration of Lana Del Rey's music. From taking inspiration from the 1940s Hollywood actress Lana Turner to being accused of romanticizing domestic abuse, Lana Del Rey has really encapsulated the duality of what Turner's life was like, you know, that paradox between the glamour and the violence. Despite the cultural misappropriation, despite the lawsuit with Radiohead and the celebrity feud with Azalea Banks in 2018, all stories I haven't had time to delve into. Despite all of that, the one accusation that Lana Del Rey can never shake is the allegedly antiquated and anti-feminist lyrics she projects through her music. And maybe as an artist, she's just writing about her personal experience of living, but I like to think it's almost fate. You know, she couldn't have written about anything else other than glamour and abuse because she was cursed from the day she chose to be known as Lana Del Rey. And with that, we're going to end the episode here. Thank you all so much for listening. If you want to keep up to date with all things Six Notes of Separation, make sure to follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Six Notes Podcast. And I'll be back very, very shortly with another episode on another artist where we'll be exploring the link between them and Lana Del Rey.